Welcome to Headlocks, Heels, and Havoc, the wildest mixed tag team in podcasting where the kayfabe drops and the chaos takes over. Let's ring the damn bell.
Headlocks tight, heels on the prowl, dropping elbows, hearing growl, feel the foul. No script here, just real, no bluff. Kayfabe crack, now the dirt gets rough. Headlocks, heels, havoc in the zone. Step in the ring, chaos at your home. No filters, no mask, just raw bare tone. Wrestling unscripted, we on the throne. Title belts, mic checks, crowd going crazy. Drop truth bombs, leaving lines feeling hazy. Beyond the kayfabe, past the charade, where legends are born and stories get made. Headlocks poppin', who's hitting the mat? Welcome to the Havoc where the real talk's at. Tune in, step through, leave the fake at the door. Headlocks, heels, havoc, now hear the roar. Legends are born.
Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. I am one half of the greatest tag team in podcasting, the legend J-Mac. With me, as always, is everybody's favorite uncle and my favorite tag team partner, Uncle Slam.
What's up, family?
And ladies and gentlemen, we also have some special guests tonight as we are going to be discussing the Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels rivalry. Tonight we have again with us, starting to become a regular thing here, JD. What's up, man? Maybe you're joining us, but we got the bad guy, JD.
Hey, yo. Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm always down to join you guys on your show. It's always a great time, and we always release some good content. And I'm streaming to my channels as per your request.
Sounds good to me. We appreciate it. We like all the viewers. And of course, wouldn't be a great show without the walking one-liner, Tucker Michael.
What's up, guys? Glad to be here. Excited to talk a little HBK, Bret Hart.
Yes. Well, before we get started on that, I would like to take a minute and let's talk a second about the passing of Mr. Ted Turner. Everybody knows he founded CNN, founded TBS, the Superstation, TNT, Turner Movie Classics, all kinds of different platforms to watch TV. He passed away this past week. I believe he was 87 years old. He was battling dementia. But as far as the wrestling goes, this is the man who kept WCW and wrestling alive for many years when a bunch of the higher ups in his company didn't see the value in it. So before we get started on HBK and Shawn Michaels, Uncle Slam, JD, Tucker, we will I'll let you all say a little something about Ted. Go ahead, Uncle Slam.
Of course, I got a lot of respect for the man. I mean, he kind of navigated some of my childhood when it comes to wrestling. I mean, growing up with WCW is probably the first thing I remember. And if it wasn't for him carrying and supporting that brand, I probably would have missed out on a lot. And also, we wouldn't have got the Monday Night Wars, which obviously made wrestling like a lot better than what it was, because competition always makes products or things better. Nothing respect, you know what I'm saying? Unfortunately, everybody has to pass, and, nothing but condolences, to his family.
JD?
Yeah, definitely condolences and prayers to his family. And, I'll say, WCW, he was the driving force behind WCW. He was the one that said, here's, money and, make the product. This is what I want. Go make the product. And it wasn't until he sold the company or until AOL and Time Warner started merging. Once those mergers started happening and he was no longer the single guy in control, that's when it all started falling apart. And I don't want to draw any parallels in terms of business, but seems to me like when Vince took WWE public, that's when things started to the wheels started coming off and falling apart as well. So I think publicly traded companies, when it comes to wrestling, not really a good idea. You should likely just keep them private and let the person running it run it. But Ted Turner, I mean, without him, I don't think WWE gets better. We likely don't have professional wrestling, at least not the way we know it today, not with all these different companies battling each other. Now, I think without his competition in the 90s against WWE, the wrestling landscape would look a lot different right now.
I 100% agree, Tucker.
The first thing I thought of whenever I heard about his passing was Vince McMahon talking about whenever he first bought the NWA, whenever Ted did. He said that he got a call from Ted Turner and Ted said, Vince, guess what? I'm in the wrestling business now, just like you.
Yeah.
And Vince responded and said, well, Ted, I'm glad to hear that, but I'm not in the wrestling business, man. I'm in the entertainment business. And I think that just really shows the dynamic of their comfortability together, and how even it's a lot like kind of what we see today in the indie scene. But you just had these two behemoths as billionaires who, even though they immediately became competition, they still both were clearly wrestling fans. I don't know a lot about Ted, and all the condolences to his family as far as his life before his wealth and his success in the business. But he was obviously, the way he carried that company for so long, such a big fan of the business. For him to literally be a person that could buy anything in the world that he wanted to, and he goes and he buys a professional wrestling company, and then pushes it, and damn near almost runs WWE, who was the Goliath at the time, out of business.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that it just goes to show that no matter how big you get, whenever you live, breathe, and die the business, it translates even across wealth classes. The
Yeah.
billionaires do it the same way that our little local indie scene promoters do it.
I agree 100%. And I agree with, a few of the statements you all made. I don't think that the landscape of wrestling would be what it is today if it wasn't for those Monday night wars and everything. So to Miss Jane Fonda, his wife, and, I believe she's still his wife, if I'm not mistaken. And to his whole family, condolences. And we just wanted to pay you a little respect and give you a 10 bell salute. So thank you for everything you did for wrestling. Thank you for the NWO, and thank you for WCW, Mr. Turner. That's right. Too sweet. All righty, guys. Today we are getting into Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. And I'm going to read this off real quick. I had a little intro for us. It says, two men, one generation, one rivalry that changed professional wrestling forever. From the excellence of execution to the Heartbreak Kid, from the technical perfection to the reckless rebellion. This is the story of hatred, respect, ego, betrayal, and legacy between two of the greatest to ever step inside the squared circle, Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. They didn't just compete for championships, they fought for the soul of an industry. Backstage politics, legendary promos, all-time classic matches, and the one moment that would leave a permanent scar on the wrestling history, the Montreal Screwjob. Tonight, we break down the rivalry that blurred the lines between storyline and reality, the rivalry that defined the 1990s, and the rivalry fans are still debating decades later. I don't know who those fans would be. So lace up your boots, hit the music, and get ready to relive one of the most personal feuds professional wrestling has ever seen. This is the Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels rivalry special. So, where do we start? Like, there's so much to start with on this. I mean, it pretty much started from the day that they, Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty stepped into into WWE as the Rockers, because I don't know how many times I saw, the Rockers versus the Hart Foundation. To me, that's where it started. Even though the rivalry didn't get to what it was, and eventually would be, it started there in those tag team matches, because you could see that these were the two guys. And it's nothing against Marty or Jim Neidhart. They're both great. I think Marty could have gotten there with Shawn had the problems, and they're well documented, not been prevalent in his life and everything. I think he could have gotten up there to being one of the top stars too, as a single star, but that's another show. So, Uncle Slam, start us off by just telling us, like, what do you think about the, Shawn Michaels, Shawn Michael, I about said Marty Jannetty, Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart rivalry.
Well, the first thing I probably need to mention is that they were actually friends at first. Like they would hang out. Obviously they worked together. I'm pretty sure Shawn used to come over Brett's house. So before all the bullshit, all the dumb shit, like they were actually cool with each other. They actually liked each other and stuff. So I think that's something we kind of need to establish,
Yes.
from the jump. I think it's kind of natural. I mean, like they're fighting over one belt. Everybody wants to be number one. They're polar opposites when it comes to, you got one that's more youthful, more athletic. You got one that's more technical. Uh, you know, so they are kind of opposites, like when it comes to styles, not only personalities. And like I said, you're going for one championship, which is the ultimate prize, and like nobody wants to be number two. So I think it would just kind of what's going to be inevitable for them to kind of cross paths or have a rivalry.
I agree. JD?
Let me first say, you're going to have to change where your comments are. Tucker's face is going to be covered with comments. No one's going to be able to see what he looks like.
Well, that don't let me change that.
Lets
me turn it off.
You might want to turn. I mean, I don't know. It's your show, bro. I'm just letting you know that his face is going to be covered in comments.
So should I just sit here the whole time going?
Yeah, exactly. You can't see me. The never seen 17. Yeah. Thank you, by the way, Andrew. Thank you for the shout outs. Thank you, Mayhem Media.
I was responding to Andrew.
I don't care. I still say thank you.
I appreciate that. And yeah, thanks, Andrew, for tuning in, buddy. Definitely go check out Popcorn and Whiskey. I'm sorry, what were you asking me, J-Mac, before you?
Just give us your initial, initial thoughts about their rivalry.
All right. Well, as a kid, when I was watching this unfold, I was a Bret Hart fan, not a Shawn Michaels fan. So I absolutely despised Shawn Michaels. And when Shawn Michaels and Triple H made DX, I was so against the first incarnation of DX, because I was a Bret Hart fan. And I didn't like that they were disrespectful to someone who was a great wrestler, who he was carrying the belt. He's the greatest in the business right now. And he's being, disrespectful. It's really the first time we've seen that level of disrespect, right, on TV and in a wrestling storyline. So to me, what sticks out, the biggest thing that sticks out was the time that Shawn Michaels literally had the Canadian flag up his nose. Like that at that time, I was like, oh my goodness, really? So, I mean, I was a kid then. Now that I'm an adult, I get the story. I understand what they were doing, because as a kid, I was bought in. I was in the whole way. I was so Bret Hart and so against Shawn Michaels. But I think that if you look back, it also boils down to what wrestling and WWE, as we just talked about with Ted Turner, right? Bret Hart is a wrestler. He is not a sports entertainer. Bret Hart is a wrestler. Shawn Michaels, I would definitely classify as more of a sports entertainer than I would call a wrestler, right? So I think their whole rivalry, I think the reason that it brewed so much of what it did from the fans is because I think subconsciously the fans even knew that this was a changing of the guard. Bret Hart was the last of the old champions. He was the last the last guy to reign for years and to hold the belt like in that way, right? And then Shawn Michaels was bringing in this new edgier way of being a champion. Of it wasn't about respect. It was they were anti-establishment. So I think it goes to show that just that their rivalry went to showcases the change in WWE's format during the 90s to enter the Attitude Era was Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels. I think that's why it also got so much attention on it the way it did.
All right, Tucker.
So I don't want to get too much heat right out of the gate, but it's hard to argue against this, no matter how much you like Bret. Bret came into the World Wrestling Federation at the time, with the Hart Dynasty or the Hart Foundation, rose to his, I think, what was it, WrestleMania 7 title shot with Yokozuna and Hogan and all that stuff, way before, Shawn was a top guy.
Oh, you're talking about
But
whenever Hogan took back over?
Yes, yeah.
WrestleMania
So, like,
9. That was
9, yeah. So, like, it's hard to argue that there wasn't a certain amount of nepotism at play for Bret, no matter how good he was or is. At that time, I feel like there was a certain amount of nepotism there because of his legacy, because of the Hart Dungeon and everything that followed suit. But now, with that being said, I agree with what you all were talking about. Bret was first and foremost a wrestler. He was very technical, and Bret was kind of sort of set in his ways. And I think the main difference that would set Shawn apart from Bret is Bret was set, Shawn was hungry. Shawn didn't care. Shawn was going to be Shawn, and he was going to do his thing. And that just happened to grow the business and connect with people. Where Bret, he was more of the old school, let's keep the status quo. You don't say that, and then bringing about him and Shawn's rivalry. I think there was a lot of realism in some of those promos where he's just like, y'all are just a bunch of degenerates here. I'm trying to be a respectable athlete and a respectable business, and y'all just a bunch of degenerates. And with the direction the 90s was going, I think that held Bret back a lot. I think moving to WCW was the worst decision he ever made for his career. You could argue the worst decision any top star has ever made for their own career. They didn't know how to use Bret. Vince did. Vince knew how to keep Bret relevant with his unwillingness to change and adapt. And that unwillingness to change and adapt was the perfect yin to Shawn's yang. And if he had never moved to WCW, what they could have had and brought that, it would have been, on par with, it would have surpassed everything. There would be no question. Like, I would argue Edge and Cena had a rivalry that was pretty equal to Shawn and Bret's. But if they had kept it up after the Montreal and he had stuck with WWE and they had realized in that moment they caught lightning in a bottle, that would have been it. Just the opportunities is I can't even fathom.
I would point out, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, J-Mac, but I would more like to point out that I don't think if that would have happened, I don't think we see the Vince McMahon character. I think the Vince McMahon character is born from the incident with Bret Hart. So I don't know that we get to see the Vince McMahon character without that. Yeah, Mr. McMahon.
I agree. I'm more saying that, like, if in that moment, after the screw job needs to take place. And then afterwards, if one person had, Pat Patterson, Vince McMahon, any of these guys had the foresight to understand what that moment was about to do for the business and it capitalized. Everybody called an audible. Everybody put their egos aside. Bret stayed with the company and they turned, a mess into a storyline. It would have been electric.
I think you're right. Because then you still get the Mr. McMahon character and you still get the, what happened with the Montreal screw job. Because I think you just let Bret be Bret, which is what you were just saying, Tucker. I'm sorry. I cut you off again, J-Mac. I'm not the host of this show.
but in another universe, would we have gotten Stone Cold? You see what I'm saying? Because we would have been more focused on the screw job and that rivalry. And I see what you're saying. I totally agree with it. But I wonder what we would have lost because of, you see what I'm saying? We would have lost Stone Cold.
I don't know
You
that you
know,
would have lost Stone Cold. I think Austin 316 was
Yeah, I
probably
think
born.
Stone Cold is pretty solidified
I think
because
it
the
would.
current.
I think it would have, but I don't think that the McMahon Austin thing would have happened because I think at that
Oh, that
point
would have
in
been Brett.
time, it would have been more of a Brett screwed Brett. So I'm going to back DX, and DX is going to be my corporate team to take Brett and the Hart Foundation out. You see what I'm saying? Even though they were anti-establishment. I don't know. There's a lot of ways that could have really
I
went and everything. It's
See, I don't think a lot of most fans knew that Vince owned the company until that happened.
Yeah,
So that was such a big thing. Most people knew, as Vince was just a commentator. Once the screw job happened, it was no doubt in people's mind that Vince was the big boss, and you can't go back from that. Now, I don't really see how you can stay at a company after what they did, some shit like that. Um, and I don't think we would have got. Obviously, you can't have the same thing with Stone Cold or the Vince McMahon if Brett stays there. I don't think as a as a person or as a man, I wouldn't have stayed at a company that shit on me like that. I get that Medusa did the shit a couple months earlier or whatever with the with the women's title, but you know, nah, man, you can't shit on a man like that and like then expect him to stay.
I
Football,
agree
and you
100%
get
with
a
that.
guaranteed contract with WCW.
Yeah,
Right. Well,
it was
but
money.
and of course hindsight being 2020, little did he know he lost $16 million on that contract because of the kick by Goldberg. I was just watching something about that today and
yeah.
everything. I didn't realize he lost $16 million. That's crazy. But that, again, that's another show. We need to do a Goldberg and Brett rivalry, even though it only
Yeah,
lasted 5 minutes.
I
It's
think that's
been
pretty
20
much
some
one
odd
sided though.
years.
That's only like
well,
one
five
match.
5 minutes. Yeah, it was only one match, but it wasn't 5 minutes. It's been
No,
35
that's
years.
what I'm saying.
Well,
The
yeah,
in-ring rivalry was 5 minutes, but
Yeah,
the actual rivalry has been 30 years.
Well,
yeah,
I think that's been parodied to the point where that's what the whole show would be is just us
yeah, pretty
impersonating
much.
Brett with,
Yep.
and Bill Goldberg. I hear he ate babies and all
Right,
the.
Bill Goldberg. All right. So let me ask you this. Was their rivalry better because of the real animosity or because it blurred into the on-screen storylines, or do you think that we would have been better off if they could have kept that, animosity down and not, it not bled over so much into the storylines? Uncle Slam?
Um, I obviously, and I think it's been said before that realism makes the best storyline. So anytime there's a touch of realism in any story, whether it's Brett and Sean or uh, Lita and Edge and them and stuff, like it just makes the story more believable. You're more vested in it. You got a more emotional connection. Um, I think if it didn't go south, we could have got a lot more great matches. Um, but hindsight's 2020 or whatever. But
I
um,
agree.
I don't think you can have it like. I don't know if it would have been as great if you didn't have that emotion in it. Like if you didn't have the realism with it, like where they really didn't like each other sometimes. Like where they did take personal shots and shit.
I
I don't
agree.
think it would have been as believable and shit. You know what I'm saying? I mean, because that was one of the things. Like we knew that like some of the shit that they were saying was actually real. That it wasn't just kayfabe. And
I
at one point, that they really didn't like each other and shit. You know what I'm saying? There was a fight between them. Backstage.
Yes. Before we go on to you, JD, I just wanted to shout out Andrew. He said
yeah,
Brett called them a bunch of degenerates. That's where the name DX came from. I think it was impromptu. You're correct. It was. He just
yeah.
kind of said it, and the next week they came out. Also, want to give a shout out to Nikita, who usually joins us on YouTube. She's joining us on Facebook today. Thank you again for being here. We love you, chick. Also, Miss Emily Rose is in the house saying, hey, we love you too. Thank you for being here. Um, I don't know. Do you know that person, Tucker, or Miss Emily Rose? Oh, look,
I've
there
seen
she
her
is, right
around.
there. We
Yeah, I've seen her around. Oh yeah, yeah. I think
ask her
she's
ask her
been
is that
living in
her?
my crawl space.
Oh, okay. Ask her is that her age, her IQ, number of friends she's got, or does that make us number one in her book?
Are we number? How are we number? Well, I'm number one on the podcast for you, right? Okay. Yeah, she says I'm number one.
All righty, getting back to it, JD. What do you think? Do you think it was better that their in ring stuff or out of ring stuff spilled over into the stories, or do you think it would have been better if that stuff kind of just laid by the wayside?
No, I agree with Uncle Slam. I think when that kind of stuff, when fans clearly can't see where the line is, I think those usually that's what interests people more, because when you watch wrestling, when you're a fan of wrestling, you do buy in, that these guys are not really punching each other in the face, right? In the middle of the ring. So you're buying into the story as a wrestling fan, right? But because of the out of the ring stuff, you really didn't know what was going to happen from a fan's perspective. Was Brett really going to punch Shawn Michaels out like when in one of their exchanges? You really didn't know how it was going to go. So I think that made it better. I think if they could have both, being businessmen the way that they both claim that they are, could have seen what they caught, as Uncle Slam also talked about just a moment ago, and put their egos aside, I think they could have turn that into more. If they'd have let the personal shit go, but kept feeding and playing like it was still happening, I think the amount of money that they could have made from their rivalry would have been huge. So I do think that the real life thing did help a lot, but I think if they would have recognized what they caught with it and been able to put that personal stuff aside, sometime after the rivalry began, the storyline began, I think it would have been better.
Okay, Tuck.
I don't think without the real animosity that we would ever have what we got. With that being said, again, we keep talking in hindsight. Some of that is genuinely hard to watch. As the kids would say, kind of cringy, and hasn't aged the best. I just was watching a clip the other day of Raw, that I'm sure everyone who knows DX or has ever watched, a DX documentary or DX clips, they've seen, bits and pieces. And it's the first time Brett calls them degenerates. As far as I'm concerned, you're just a couple of degenerates. Well, in that same promo, there's some parts that hasn't aged well with, like, Brett slinging some homophobic slurs, basically, saying, as far as I'm concerned, you guys are a couple of homos. And then Triple H is basically like, no, I ain't no homo, just very, very 90s, very, again, hasn't aged the best. But and I will say cringeworthy, but it just really goes to show just the rawness where, oh, these guys now, they're on stage, they're 100 yards apart. One's in the ring, one's at the top of the ramp. They're pissed at each other. They're throwing shade. They're throwing out schoolyard playground insults. And
Yeah.
as a fan watching it, because it was so impromptu, Brett's, as far as I'm concerned, you're just a couple of homos, and that homo next to you in the green. And then Triple H chimes in, oh, I ain't no homo. Very raw, like, nuh-uh, like I said, just degenerate, juvenile things that was just raw and on TV. And I was watching that going, this is what WWE doesn't show in their highlight reels, but this is actually what created DX. This is actually the difference. This raw animosity that they had. I don't think it would have happened without it. And if they had been professional and put it all aside, I don't think we would have gotten it. I just don't. I don't think we would have had, Sean going, okay, well, he said this, so now I'm going to, ruin his life and destroy his marriage, and, you know, talk about that. I'm sure we'll get into that, later.
Right.
Yeah.
But, we
Sunny
won't have
days.
those moments of, we can sit here and act mature, like, even as adults, like, we don't get into stupid petty pissing contests with people that we dislike, but then we can also sit here and waste our time lying to each other, because we all do it, or we all want to do it. And that was the realness of DX, and that was why Brett, and I think only Brett in that role could have created DX the way he essentially did.
It definitely took because and we've touched on it earlier too. Everybody's talking, and I meant to say this earlier because JD said that they're so opposite of each other.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? I have no doubt that Sean could have went the route of Brett and been like the technical master, but I think because of his time with the Rockers and stuff like that, he really embraced kind of, and not only that, but him being trained by Jose Lothario, he kind of embraced a little bit more of that lucha libre style. You know, the Hurricane Ranas and the high flying and stuff like that. It wasn't necessarily prevalent back then because, as everybody knows, it was WCW in the mid 90s that really started showcasing all the cruiserweight lucha libre and stuff like that, Mexican style and Japanese style wrestling. But the thing that I always looked at was, and it always blew my mind, and I don't know if it's why I think that it's one of the best rivalries of all time, but Brett was that ground and pound. Sean was that high flying athletic guy. But it was like, for as opposite as they were so equal, if that makes sense. They were equal but opposite. They were opposite equals, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying.
And I think that just bled beautifully into the rivalry itself. I mean, and all you got to do is go back and look at that, Iron Man match.
Yeah.
A lot of people say it's a hard match to watch. I don't think it is. If you really want to see what wrestling is, watch that Iron Man match. They told a great story.
Who are you talking to that says that that's not a good match?
It's online stuff and everything. I was reading, just doing some research and stuff and everything. It's not that they say it's not a great match. They said that like mostly it didn't have to be an hour long.
Oh, that's so ridiculous. And that's the problem with the WWE. That's always been my problem with the WWE. The Iron Man match is one of the few matches that I point to and I'm like, that's WWE wrestling. That's what it should have been.
Well, no, I mean, it wasn't WWE that said that. It was just, fans in general.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, no, it was WWE that said that. So if you read in Sean's book, he talks about how one of his dreams, because, he was a student of Ric Flair. He was... his biggest idol was the 60-minute man, the guy who would go out with Piper or, Steamboat and have an hour-long match in a house show. Yep. And one of their biggest concerns, because he pushed to do an Iron Man match for a long time and basically said, he outlines in his book, that the only man he would have done it with was Bret Hart. And he was pushing for that to be the match at WrestleMania 12. And all the higher-ups was saying, I don't know if we can keep the fans watching for 60 minutes. So even in 96, they were hesitant to have an hour-long match.
Well, and I think that too is because that wasn't WWE's formula, like JD was saying. Their formula had been Hogan, 20 minutes, Hulk up, and then go home.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that was about it. And most of that match was, lock in a chin, a chin lock or, some kind of a nerve hold or something. And that was the end of it. So let me ask you all this. Who do you all, because I'm going to go ahead and tell you my answer to this. I'm going to say that neither one of them was very fabulous at this. But who do you all think, and be objective, because I know I've got us separated on sides here. You see the two Bret Hart fans are over there on the Bret Hart side, and the two HBK fans are over here. Yeah, look, he done went and got him a shirt and everything made up just for this. I know it. That's great. But now, so who do you all think, honestly and truthfully and objectively, who was the better pro?
Gotta grab my HBK hat.
There you go. There, yeah, give the nod to HBK and everything. But who do you all think? Don't make me get up here in a second, start dancing and everything. I don't want to have to scare the audience.
Break a hip over there. Go ahead, Grandpa.
Yeah, we don't want. You're trying to keep your viewers this week.
That's all right. I'll make them all tap out. No, I'm just joking. Yeah. Tap out of the show, that is. But no. But no, so who do you all starting with you, Uncle Slam? Who do you think was the better overall promo? Not
Better
in ring, just
promo?
promo. Just promo.
Giving promos, I don't know, because I don't really remember either one of them giving the greatest promos. Honestly, like I said, that's not what I think. When I think about them, I don't think about them cutting great promos like I do the Rock. I mean, they would cut bad promos, by any stretch, but I just don't think of them like that when I think of promos. If I had to pick one, um, I don't know.
I can tell
I
this
guess
is
I just go
painful.
Brett because he's my
Oh,
favorite or whatever. I mean, like I really can't. Like I said, promos. Like I really don't even.
Yeah.
It's just kind of,
right.
and that's the
It's
only
it.
reason. Because, like I said, none of them like had moving promos for me.
No. JD.
I agree completely with Uncle Slam. I don't think either one of them had super promo skills or great promo skills, but what I always remember about them is their exchanges with each other. That's why I think people think maybe or inflate maybe their mic skills more than they were, because together, opposite, they could just sit there and talk and people would be screaming at them for 20 or 30 minutes if they were if they had a segment that long. So I think both of them got better when they would talk against each other, but without each other, I would rate them on average mic skills.
Okay. Tuck.
So I'm gonna, again, speaking objectively, I'm gonna have to go with Sean, but here's why. And this ties into his character and who he was. Because do I think he was a great promo cut? No, he was. He would never compare to Austin or The Rock or even Triple H for that matter. Triple H could cut a better promo than Sean.
I don't know about
But
that. I have to dispute that one.
we'll do the Triple H versus Sean later, I guess.
Yeah.
Tonight, we are gonna.
Well, and he leaned into it. That's the thing, and that's pretty much what I was going to say about Sean. Is Sean on the mic, especially during the height of his and Brett's rivalry, he just did not give a flying what he was going to say. He didn't give a shit what came out of his mouth, and so he would say anything and everything. And to his credit, with his character of the whole Heartbreak Kid sexy boy, if Brett came out and gave a bad promo, it was like, oh, okay, yeah, that was bad, that was corny, whatever. Sean was a piece of candy corn on an ear of corn planted in a cornfield. There was nothing not corny about his character, from Rockers to Heartbreak Kid to HBK to, even as an old man doing DX. He was always corny. He was the arrogant, cocky, I'm going to kick your ass and steal your girl. And so he got away with the bad promos a little bit more because of that. Like if Sean looked out of the crowd and says, I can have any woman here, he's not doing it as smoothly as Ric Flair and as believable, but he was the heel, so that's kind of the point. Almost like this narcissistic, like,
Yeah.
I think I'm great, and if you don't think I'm great, but you think I think I'm great, then I'm getting the point across.
Right.
And
I
so
see.
I think he was able to lean into that a little bit more. And so he was better on the mic, not because he was the better promoter, but because for what they were doing, he had the better he had the easier character. It's easier to be a heel than it is a babyface.
Yes.
And so I'd have to go with Sean, just maybe even just circumstantially, but especially when it came to the two of them, they're back and forth. I agree with Uncle Slam and JD. Whenever they were together, that was the best work they did, period.
I agree with that. And like I said, I don't think that either one of them, and I think everybody, it's pretty much a consensus on this panel that neither one of them were great promos. Nobody's going to put them in the top 5 of promos. I'd put, Hogan, Austin, Rock, and so many others, Ric Flair above him. And I don't think Ric Flair was a great promo. I think Ric Flair just learned how to say the same thing over and over for 30 years, and people just bit into it, and they loved it so much that it didn't matter. He could just repeat the same thing. How many years did we hear about the alligators, staying still and stuff like that? Which, and that's fine. It worked. It's what it did for him. just like Brett and Sean's both worked for them for what it was.
Right.
But like, I don't think that like, I think Sean was just a slight bit better. And I'm not saying that because he's my favorite. I'm saying it because even when Brett was a good guy or a bad guy, he always had that. You could always tell he was trying to take the moral high road. You know what I'm saying? He didn't cuss much. You know, he was always trying to be a role model, even as a bad guy, as a heel.
I think that was kind of like his character or whatever.
Yes,
Or,
yes.
yeah, pretty much.
And because Sean was more of the degenerate, you know what I'm saying? He was able to get by with saying a little bit more. So because of that, I think that opened him up to be just a little bit of a better promo, not by any stretch. You know, I'm talking about like a third of a point, you know what I'm saying? It's something like that.
Yeah.
But it was just the edge he needed in that department. But again, Brett taking the moral high ground and being that moral, you know, hero character, Sean being the degenerate that was their characters. So it was just they played into what they had. So
yeah.
Bret Hart was Hulk Hogan that knew how to wrestle. Shawn Michaels was Ric Flair from Generation X as opposed to Baby Boomer.
I can see that.
Good analogy.
I can see that. I'm honestly, truthfully can. Okay, so let me ask you all this. What do you all consider the greatest match between Sean and Brett? Or can you even narrow it down to one single match? Or was it just magic every time they got into the ring together? Uncle Slam?
Well, obviously, like anytime they got together, I mean, they always had great matches. I mean, like they'll both admit, like working with each other was easy. You know what I'm saying? Like Brett knew when he was working with Sean. Sean knew when he was working with Brett. If I got him, I'm gonna have a good day. I'm gonna have a, you know, we're gonna tell a good story. We're gonna have a beautiful match. You know, yeah, Brett was, as I always say, he's the wrestler, and Sean's more of a performer. So, like when you put those two together, I mean, it's kind of, you know, guaranteed to have a good match. I mean, probably the one that, like most people are going to say, would probably be the Iron Man match. Just because, like I said, it went 60 minutes. Actually, it went 60 minutes plus because, you know, it went 60 minutes. Brett won, and then Vince was like, "Oh no, we need to go to sudden death." And then, of course, that's how Sean won the belt. So, you know, I'm not bitter about that at all.
It's only been 30 years.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with that. I'm not bitter.
All right. JD.
Yeah, I'm gonna definitely say the Iron Man match. I think that was probably their best match together. I think anytime you get a match, a 60-minute Iron Man match, if you have the right people, it's going to be good. And I think if you go back and watch that match, you don't even realize how long the match is when you're watching it. And that's not something that's easy to do either. So Iron Man match for sure.
Tuck?
I feel like you have to say the Iron Man match just because, especially for 1996, it was Shawn and Taker at WrestleMania 25. You are really hard pressed to find a better match in wrestling up until 1996. If the screw job hadn't happened, you could argue that would have been a better match. I mean, up until that spot, they were giving it their all. Honestly, though, I think my favorite match that really shows kind of, again, not necessarily the best, but probably my favorite, and it might not even be one that you guys are familiar with. I've seen it a million times. I used to have it on DVD, but I always love, and Sean and Brett will both say it's a garbage match, but they're the one that won the world tag team match between the Hart Foundation and the top rope broke.
Oh, you talking about with the Rockers?
With the Rockers versus the Hart Foundation. That was a great match with four people who especially now, would argue that they weren't even veterans at the time. They had this catastrophic, thing happen in the middle of the ring, and they just roll with it, and they still put on a decent, they didn't air it, so they never won the titles and all that, but it just really showed how well those four-man just meshed, and they just made it work. They had a good chunk of the match with no top rope, and they still delivered a really, really damn good match.
And just like Uncle Slam, them not winning that tag team title, I'm not bitter about that.
No, I'm not bitter. No, the Rockers didn't need to be the tag team. They're not arguably one of the
Of
greatest
course
of all
not.
time.
I'll be honest with you. I love the Rock and Roll Express, but and it's nothing against Ricky or Robert. I think they are one of the top probably 10, 15 greatest tag teams of all time. But there was just something about them that they didn't fit that image the way that Marty and Sean did. And I know we're not going off on a Rockers thing, but or versus the Rock and Roll, but I don't know. That was just me, just a little side note. So let me ask you this. If how do I ask this? Do you think that Vince okay, take the screw job out of it because we're going to get into the screw job here in just a second. Take the screw job out of it. We know how much Vince loved Shawn Michaels. We know how much Vince, up until the screw job, loved Bret Hart. He really did believe that Bret Hart was his next big thing after Hogan. And that's even having The Undertaker, having Yokozuna, having Bret, or not Bret, Lex Luger. You know what I'm saying? He had a lot of people. Tatanka was even talked about as being world champion in that time, and they were going to push him as a huge, big world champion, to kind of bring back the Native American thing with, how they did it back in the day with, I can't remember if it was Wahoo or Chief J Strongbow was one of them. But, do you think that Vince was more loyal to Bret or to Shawn, or do you feel like it was kind of equal up until, of course, the screw job? Uncle Slam?
Oh shit, this is easy as hell. What are you talking about? This is softball. Of course it was Sean. There was favoritism. Man, what are you talking about? First of all, let's just get this straight. You're not gonna pay a man who for 3 years, 750,000, who ain't working for you if there's not some type of favoritism going on.
4 years.
Let's just get 4 years. I'm sorry, 4 years, 750, and tell him every time the budget comes up to just eat it. I don't think Bret's getting that same consideration. Let's just put that there. Okay, and then you look at all the bullshit that Sean got away with. Prime example, right after he won the belt, what did he say to Sean and tell the ref? Tell him get his ass out the ring. You think anybody else would have, telling the ref, hey, tell him get out of the ring? Bret just gave you 60 minutes. And you're gonna shit on him and disrespect him. He just passed the torch to you. You think Vince would have let anybody else do that shit? You got to look at okay, all the shit Sean got away with other wrestlers and shit. People he didn't like. People he probably pushed out of the business. If he didn't want to do some shit, he's telling you, I'm not doing that, Vince. Do you think Bret's going to get that same consideration? You think Bret's going to be able to be like, you know what, Vince, I'm not going to read this. I need to read that, Bret. I'm not reading that shit. And then go read whatever you want. He's not getting the same. No. So, yes, there was huge favoritism. And, I don't know if it's because, they were closer in friendship. I don't know if there was some backstage shit going on that we heard, I don't
knew
know.
he was going to go down that.
I don't know. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what happened in wrestling, but hey, I'm
Vince
just saying.
McMahon used to wear Shawn Michaels' hoodie backstage.
I don't know what he did back in the day. All I know was he was very close to him. He was like a father figure to him.
He definitely called him daddy.
Yeah, I mean, it was so blatant, obvious. I mean, everybody knew that Vince had favorites and shit, and Shawn was definitely one of them. Shawn got away with a lot of shit, especially who else is going to be able to be on drugs and show up fucked up and still be able to keep their job like he did as many times as he did if there wasn't some type of bias or favoritism. Because, we can't forget that. But I mean, Sean had a drug problem, he had issues and shit. And if, like if Vince didn't really like him, if Vince didn't care about him, or Vince didn't show him some treatment, his ass would have been gone. So yes, I mean that's 1,000% sure there was a lot more favoritism towards Shawn Michaels.
JD.
Yeah, I think he soured on Bret. I think he did like Bret Hart, Vince McMahon. I think he was the chosen one for a brief time. I think Vince soured on Bret when he faced Yokozuna and then ended up putting the belt back on Hogan. That's when I think Bret should have realized he was not going to be the guy for the next 20 years. That there was not going to be likely going to be a guy for the next 20 years. So I guess you could argue Triple H maybe. But, there wasn't going to be a guy at that time. Nobody was being set up to be the next Hogan. Vince didn't want another Hogan. He was looking for something different. So I think he had soured on Bret when he decided not to have him beat Yokozuna and ended up having him get injured, or however that nonsense match went down. And then Hogan comes in and big boots him and leg drops him, and then he wins the belt. Like that was, I think that's when Vince soured on Bret.
Tucker.
I think it's very complicated. I think that ultimately Vince did favor Shawn more. I think he liked Bret more. And going back to what Uncle Slam said, you have to have some favoritism to be able to show up, high and drunk and, and have the problems that Shawn have and still do it. In 1994, 95, no, I'm sorry, this would have been like 95, 96, right before Bret got released. Vince signed Bret to the biggest contract WWE had ever issued, and this pissed off Shawn. Because Shawn had signed that record contract a little bit before him and Taker, and he had basically told Vince, I don't care what you pay anybody, just don't pay them more than me or Taker, because nobody performs like we do and nobody does what we do. Well, Shawn finds out that he signs Bret for a bigger contract. And he goes to Vince, and Vince, according to Shawn, Vince tells him, was like, listen, yeah, we did this. We did it to keep him. But we can't afford to keep him on that contract. So something's going to have to give. And ultimately, that's what led to him signing with WCW. Vince basically let him cancel his own contract. It was this whole political thing. But, it kind of goes back to like a Charlie Sheen, rock star, rock and roll type guy. Somebody once asked me what I wanted out of this job in sales that I had. And I responded with, I said, I want to be able to show up drunk and nobody fire me. And the point of that is, like Shawn Michaels, you can show up high, but if you're still the best performer on the card, nobody's going to say shit to you. You can show up to work drunk, but if you're still selling and making somebody more money than anybody else that's working for that company, they're not going to say anything to you. And that's, I think he favored Shawn more because of his ability in the ring, but I think he ultimately liked Bret more. I don't think Bret was nearly the pain in the ass. I think Vince saw Bret and still had like nostalgia for the days of Eat Your Vitamins and Say Your Prayers. But I think Vince was smart enough to recognize that wasn't putting butts in seats at that time. Shawn was more likely to be the bridge in the gap that's going to start putting the butts in the seats, even though he wasn't. This was during the Monday Night Wars, and they were not, killing it in the ratings, but they were still selling out venues.
I feel I agree with what you're saying, where Bret was that bridge from the golden era to the new generation.
Yeah.
Shawn was the bridge from the new generation to the attitude. He was the pre-attitude attitude. And to be honest with you, I don't think he favored one more than the other until the screw job. Now, I agree with what you were saying, Tucker. I believe he thought that Bret was less of a pain in the ass. Bret was less of a problem, there are times, I've seen I have seen examples of it and everything where Brett refused to do certain things. He didn't refuse to do it the way that Sean did, like Uncle Slam was saying, literally just disrespecting the boss, and like Triple H just said, crumpling up pieces of paper and throwing it in his chest and saying, "No, I'm not doing that." Brett was more diplomatic about it. He would go to the back and say, "Look, it doesn't make sense for me to do this and this." And there are, plenty of examples of that. So I won't say that he favored him more. I would say, like you were saying, in those extreme examples, Sean probably got by with more crap than any wrestler ever has. And that's including Bret Hart, even maybe Hulk Hogan. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I would even go that far as to say that. So if in that form of favoritism, yes, I think he favored Sean over just about anybody else that ever worked for him. But as far as between just them two, I think they had a fair amount of favoritism. It was just a different type of favoritism.
See, I don't know how you can say that though. Like you said, I mean, because one of your main arguments is because of the way he performed. He didn't perform for 4 years. And he still got paid. What was
Okay.
he?
And I
So what
believe
was he
had
getting performed for him? Like if there's no favoritism,
loyalty,
like
loyalty. I
yeah,
believe had the
but you
screw
said
job not happened and an injury like that happened to Brett, I 100% believe that he would have taken care of Brett the same exact way.
No way.
like I said,
I don't
I
believe that.
had this, like I said, had the screw job not happened and all that bad blood, I do not believe that he would have just let Brett sit up on the shelf and suffer.
no. Like Brett was leaving no matter what. Like Vince even told Brett to take the money from WCW. They talked about it. Like it wasn't like a
Right,
shock.
because he couldn't
Like he
get,
knew
he
he
couldn't
was
pay
going
him
from
that.
the jump. And
But
that's
I'm
why
not
they gave such a great last match because he knew he was leaving right afterwards and
right.
shit.
But you're also talking about 3 years later, whenever
What do
the
you mean?
injury to Sean happened. He told him to take it, and then he done the screw job. I'm saying, had the screw job not happened and flipped the script, Brett got injured and his back got blown out. And I did not mean it for it to sound like that. But had he gotten, his lower back messed up the way that Sean did and had to hang it up for 4 years with no animosity,
So
I
you think he would have
100
still paid him?
I do.
No,
I
I
do.
don't think so.
I do.
I think he
I
would have.
think, and I
I
think
think he
he's
would
one
have.
of only. I think he's one of only 3 to 4 people that Vince would have ever done anything like that for. The other 3 being, of course, Sean and Taker and Hogan.
I think he would have
I said,
paid. I
go
think he
ahead,
still would have
JD.
paid Bret Hart, but I think he would have got a reduced rate, like as per whatever their injury deal is. If you're not performing, you're not making money. You still make some of your money on your contract, but not all of it. And I think he would have. I think he would have been cut. I think he would have his rate would have been cut down. Bret Hart was not making $750,000 a year on the shelf. That's my counter argument. No, I don't.
No, he
believe.
was making more money per year.
Yeah, no. But what I'm
Working
saying,
though, working.
Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
he,
But
Yeah,
no, what
but
I'm saying is,
yeah, but at WCW
making
maybe,
one.
but not at WWF. He
well,
wasn't
Shawn
because he
Michaels.
took the money because I think the money from WCW was like 2 million a year. That's why he left and shit.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is, Shawn Michaels, you guys have been saying, got paid $750 a year for 4 years to sit on the shelf, right?
Yeah.
I'm saying no. Bret Hart does not make $750 a
Yeah.
year sitting on the shelf for 4 years. He might make 400, maybe 300, maybe even $500,000, but he's not making the full contract rate during that time off. No, he's not. No, I don't believe Vince would have paid Bret Hart a full contract if he was injured. He did that for Sean. I will agree with you that I think he might do it for Taker. I don't
Yeah.
believe that he would have done it for Brett.
Okay, so
I
hold
believe
on.
he would have done it for
I just got
Taker
a
and maybe Hogan. Go ahead.
I just got a breakdown of how that whole thing was supposed to work, because apparently after about 3 to 4 years, Brett was going to start talking about moving to a backstage role. So it says for the first 3 years as an active wrestler, Brett would have got 1.5 million per year. So you're telling me he wouldn't have reduced him down to 750,000 and let him sit for 4 years?
I think that's what I'm saying. He would have been reduced.
Right.
Like
But
he might have got like 150, 250, something like that, but he ain't getting the whole 750.
From 1.5, Brett wouldn't have let that happen.
He wouldn't have had a choice. I mean,
I'll go.
Like, I don't know how the contract's structured and stuff. I mean, like, is that first in the contract where he has to give him the money, or like is it just generosity?
Right. We would need to know like injury stuff like
I'm going
that.
to keep paying you.
Right. So it says the first 3 years as an active wrestler, he would have been right at 1.5 million per year. Next 7 years in a backstage advisor role, about 500K a year. And then the final 10 years as an ambassador legend role, about 250K a year. So he had him set up for the 20-year contract. It's just that shit went south because, well, for one thing, WWE just about had to hang it up.
I think WWE would have made a killing on that deal eventually, because I think if the screw job and everything hadn't happened, I think Brett would have made them a lot more money than that contract paid out.
I 100% agree, because they could have gotten Mr. Perfect back. Like I said, there was that time right there, that 4 or 5 year, and we've discussed it, Uncle Slam, I don't know how many times. There was that 4 or 5 year gap right there where we could have had Perfect, Brett, Owen and Sean, all like, vying for that world title area. And then them bringing up Triple H and Stone Cold. And, of course, and then you even still had The Undertaker sticking his nose in to that 4 thing going on, because, he didn't need the title to be relevant. He could have just come in and whooped somebody every now, what I'm saying? That kind of thing. But then you had the Rock, Stone Cold, and all them coming up too. Man, it could have been great if all that crap, for everything good that happened in the Attitude Era, there was so much bad that happened too, and we lost so much. And I hate that so bad.
There's the Survivor Series tag team dream match no one ever thought of. The one of the Attitude Era, if the screw job hadn't happened. The Hart Foundation with Sean and some of those guys versus the up and comers, Rock, Triple H, Stone Cold.
Oh God, could you imagine? Like, let's see, who would that be? Sean, Brett, Undertaker. Who would the 4th be? I'd probably say Owen.
Owen, yeah.
No, I think it'd just have it the Hart Foundation. Have it be Brett, Owen.
No, we want the best we want the best in the Survivor Series.
I don't think Shawn Michaels. I think he would be with DX. I'm saying my argument is
no. I'm not saying Hart Foundation. I'm saying just a 4-man Survivor Series team versus the Attitude Generation.
But I'm saying I would put Shawn Michaels in with the Attitude Era more than I would put him with the.
Oh, I wouldn't, because he was only in the Attitude Era for what, a year and a half before he got injured.
Both, honestly,
the whole DX, the DX though, like that's where he was Shawn Michaels.
Yeah,
but DX started. That was his biggest run.
People don't really, but it wasn't. But it really wasn't. Because people forget that was such a short-lived run. The real DX, the long-term and biggest impact DX was Triple H, X-Pac, and the New Age Outlaws.
Certainly, but they wouldn't have existed had Shawn and Triple H not been able to do what they did.
Well, no, I mean
and I would argue that Shawn's best run was when he was in DX. He was the world champion, the European champion. I think,
I don't know. For me, the Attitude Era starts the Monday after WrestleMania 14, whenever they switched from the Winged Eagle to the Big Winged Eagle. Stone Cold's champion. That belt changing is the beginning of the Attitude Era.
I will go and say that I will be honest with you. I think Shawn Michaels' best work and his best run, even though the business was down, and it wasn't Sean's fault, it wasn't Brett's fault, because that's my next question for you all. But I think Shawn Michaels individually, his best work was when, from the time he won that Intercontinental Championship from the British Bulldog to the time that he won his first World Championship. I think that was the best Shawn Michaels that we ever got to see. Not saying that he didn't have great matches afterwards, but you got to stop and think that included ladder match. That included, the Iron Man match. That included all those battles. Look, Shawn Michaels went out in Survivor Series and had 3 friggin' generic knights fighting the Hart family. You know what I'm saying? I mean, of course, we found out later it was like Terry Funk and other people under the masks and everything. But you know what I'm saying? It was Shawn Michaels did a lot during that era. I personally think that was his greatest era. And I have lost the question that I was gonna ask you all.
Well, just for because I think this is like something that if I'm trying to do the timeline here, y'all, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't guess I ever looked at it like this. But okay, so Survivor Series is always November, right?
Yes.
November-ish, yeah.
Okay. So Survivor Series 1997, the screw job happens.
Yes. I believe it's
Sean
97 or
retires.
96.
It was 90. Yeah, it was 90, yeah 96. Yeah, it was 97. 96 WrestleMania was WrestleMania 12. 97 was WrestleMania 13 because 98 was WrestleMania 14. So Survivor Series 97 happens in November. Come March or April of 98. So November of 97 to let's say April of 98. In that time, we have Hell in a Cell. We have Kane making his debut. We have a good chunk of what DX was with Shawn, and we have the casket match that leads to Shawn's injury and his ultimate retirement at WrestleMania 14. Am I? So for November of '97, the screw job happens. By April, Shawn is retired.
Right.
Does that sound right?
Pretty
Yeah.
much. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got the screw job happening in '97. Sean's at the peak of his heel turn. You know, he's got the most amount of heat. The screw job just happens. They talk about how tense the locker room was. That's in November. By April, he's out. He's out. I never realized how short amount of time that really was.
Yeah.
Everything that he did with Taker was right there
Yeah.
from November to Apral.
Like I said, we got robbed of a lot of stuff right there, and that it
Yeah.
really sucks.
Yeah, because Royal Rumble '98 is where that casket match took place, where he got injured.
So Uncle Slam, we have been dancing around it and everything. We are, and I know I'm going to get. I want hot takes on this from everybody, and I want to hear your honest, true feelings. Don't hold back. Tell us, Uncle Slam, how you feel about the Montreal screw job. You have the floor, sir.
Well, it's pretty easy. I feel like he got shafted. I feel like he got shit on. I feel like his loyalty was taken advantage of. I know he went to Vince. They talked about it. He was like, "Hey, I don't mind losing the belt. You know, I don't want to lose it at home, obviously. You know, but you know, we can do a DQ. We can do so and so. Then you know, obviously, you can't. You know, title doesn't change hand on DQ or whatever. But he was willing to work with them. He even went to Sean and was like, "Hey, Sean, I'll do business. I've always been a company man. You know, however it takes to lose to you. You know, I don't mind losing to you." And what did Sean say? I appreciate that, man, but I wouldn't do that for you. Obviously, the disrespect there, you know, kind of fueled a lot of it, and that's like one of the reasons he went to Vince. Was like, hey, look, I don't mind losing to him, but I would rather not lose to him and shit. But I truly believe he was going to give up the belt. And I understand why Vince was apprehensive. Like I said, what was it, maybe a month or so before Medusa had dropped the like women's belt in the trash can on WCW. That's something that you couldn't have happen again. I definitely understand why. But and this is just my opinion, I felt like if he trusted Brett, that Brett would have done the right thing. I I I I understand that part of it, that you know, that's one of those things you can't let happen. But I believe Brett was the type of person, he was old school. I believe he would have done the right thing. I don't think he would have took the belt to WCW. I believe he would have gave it up some other way or whatever and shit. But given how Sean and Vince were, you know, given how everybody knew he was leaving or whatever. But if you don't have the Montreal screw drop, then you know you don't have a lot of other big things that happen. So in one sense, it was bad, but at the next, it also birthed a lot of good shit. It also birthed a lot of wrestling. Great wrestling, a lot of other great moments. So you know, I'm always gonna be Team Brett on this. So.
All righty. JD, give us your take.
Yeah, I'm not. I wasn't at the time. I wasn't a fan of the screw job. I don't like people plotting behind someone else's back. So I didn't really care for that whole thing. But, as I got older, from a business perspective, I understand why Vince couldn't allow that to happen. It had happened with Alundra Blaze. And as Uncle Slam said, I actually do think Bret Hart likely would have just given the title back. I don't think he would have actually taken it to WCW with him. But you could argue the same thing about Alundra Blaze, right? She's from the old school era. You wouldn't have thought that she would have taken their belt and put it in the trash can on television either. So, I understand why Vince felt burned and why he felt that he had no choice. He had to keep his belt. I don't think the screw job was the way to go around it. I think if anything, you just have him, you just at the top of the ramp. You say, Brett, give me the belt back. You're leaving. You're done. Fine. You won the match. You're the champion, and now you're done and you're left, and you've just dropped the title. It's mine now. So I think you could have. There's other ways around it. You didn't have to do the screw job, and I understand from a story perspective. Certainly, that wouldn't have been great for Bret Hart to win the title over Shawn Michaels. Pretty much would have buried Shawn Michaels, even if you did a tournament and he would have won because Bret Hart didn't put him over. So I think they're both at fault. I think it was wrong for Bret Hart not to want to do the job to Shawn Michaels. That's wrestling. I don't care about his personal problems with Shawn Michaels. I understand that they were extensive. I have personal problems with people. But when it comes down to business time, you don't let personal stuff get in the way. So I think Bret should have just done the job. And not at the time, I didn't feel that way. But in hindsight, now that I'm older, I definitely think Bret Hart should have just done the job. He's a businessman. It was a business decision. It had nothing to do with anything. It had nothing to do with anything. You were making a business decision to drop the belt, to leave the WWE on good terms, to start the next chapter of your journey. And I think if he would have just done that, the screw job wouldn't have even happened. And so that's what I think about it.
All righty, Tuck, give us your take.
I think that ultimately the screw job proves one thing and one thing is only, and that is that Bret Hart is one of the biggest hypocrites that has ever worked for Vince McMahon. And I say that only because of his own words. All the heat that he had against Hogan in regards to Yokozuna and that whole thing, and Hogan playing the politics. Bret, to this day, will go in interviews and talk trash about Hogan for pulling that move at WrestleMania 9, I think it was, we just said, and then turn around and 97 do the exact same thing. And I agree with JD. At the end of the day, the beef, you just put it aside and you just do business. According to Triple H, when they were back there trying to figure out what to do, he was the one that spoke up and said, you know what, Kim, if he don't do business, you do business for him. And I think the screw job was necessary. I think that Bret not doing business not only devalued the title, but it shit on every single person that ever wore that belt before, including Hogan, including Shawn. I think Bret had this persona of being old school and being all about the business, and he disliked DX and he disliked Shawn for his backstage politics, and then when push comes to shove, he's not willing to do business. And that's I think that the value of that title gets lost so much from what it really should be. I had a huge problem, and a huge problem is subjective, but I had a problem with the fact that at WrestleMania 26, Shawn and Taker main evented that WrestleMania. Their match, Shawn's retirement match, and I love Shawn Michaels; he's my favorite of all time. But the fact that they main evented WrestleMania and that the last match on the card was not that WWE title, and the last thing you saw wasn't, I don't even remember who the WWE Championship match was that night. Probably Cena, maybe Triple H, I don't know. But the fact that they weren't that WWE champion was not the last face that you saw whenever the screen cut to black, it devalues the title and it devalues the company. And luckily it was Survivor Series, it wasn't WrestleMania. But yeah, I think Bret was a hypocrite for it. I think it's exactly what should have done. I think Bret should have just done business. But I think he basically just, he threw the title in the trash without throwing the title in the trash by not doing business.
Totally understand. I am a big proponent of two things can be true at the same time. I believe, and I'm not saying this may be controversial and a hot take. Yes, I believe Shawn Michaels is at fault for some of the screw job. Do I believe that he should have taken on as much of the controversy as he did? No. And I'll tell you why, because it's what Tucker just touched on. It wasn't Sean who suggested if he don't do business, we'll do business for him. It was Triple H. So in essence, it was Triple H and Vince who made that decision to screw Brett. Sean went out there and went through with it. And because of that, yes, he's at fault. Does that make him as much at fault? I don't think so. And I think it really sucks that both of them put him in that position because crap was already bad between them. You know what I'm saying? As far as bad blood. So it's almost like Vince and Triple H, and I hate to say it, we're starting to see it about Triple H nowadays as an executive. He's like Vince. He smelled blood in the water. He smelled blood in the water. There's a way to play off this hatred between them. F him. If he don't do business, let's do business for him, and we'll just put Sean in that shitty position that he's going to be the one that everybody points at all the time. Now, again, that does not absolve him of anything. I also agree that Brett was shady about it because, you know, again, you went back to the Hogan thing. All the, you know, you can find a million videos, talking about Brett burying Hogan and how much of a piece of crap Hogan is. Watch the new documentary on Netflix if you want to hear anything about it, because he says he calls him a piece of trash and all kinds of names in it and everything. So he did the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I think, and there's probably a handful that I can name that were superstars that never really pulled the politics stuff. But again, they never had to. And I'm talking about like The Undertaker. I wouldn't be able to put a list together right now, but that's the first name that comes to mind. Didn't play politics. Maybe Andre, kind of like the people we were talking about on the Undertaker episode, Uncle Slam and JD. You know, the thing about the Undertaker was he just had respect. He didn't have to play politics. You know what I'm saying? Him, Andre, Harley Race, people like that. But you get to your Hogans, your Bretts, your Shawns, your Triple H's, your Rocks, Stone Cold. They've all played politics in some way, shape, or form.
Yep.
And I agree, again, that two things can be true at the same time. I agree. I think Brett respected the business enough that he would have, done the right thing and just left with the title in the WWE's hands. I don't agree that he shouldn't have just, again, like you said, dropped it to Sean, just done business. You put the guy over as you're leaving. That's what gives them the boost. They beat the big guy. It kind of devalues it if you have to go out and get it in a tournament or a fatal four-way or something like that. I don't think that he did the right thing. I think he played his politics and he got what he wanted. My son said DX was the best. Case closed. Thank you, son. That's right. I knew I raised you up.
But see, when it all falls down, though, Vince always had the final say. So it doesn't matter if Hunter said this, if so-and-so said this. Vince is the one that has the final say. So it all lies at Vince's feet. Because
you're
Vince
right.
Is the boss at the end of the day.
It
didn't matter what anybody said. And like I said, we'll never know if he was going to do business because they took the choice out of his hand. They didn't even let him give him a chance.
Right.
To know if he was going to do the right thing. So,
what I think
and for Sean to sit there and act like he didn't know the shit was going to happen when he did know.
Oh, no, right. I agree. He was wrong.
You know what I'm saying? And then lie to Brett when Brett asked him in the locker room, like, hey, man, did you know this was happening?
But
nah, man, I swear to God, I didn't know nothing about that.
That was Vince too. Vince told
Exactly.
him,
Vince
"You
told him to
lie."
say the shit,
Right?
but see,
Yeah, he said, "You lie your butt off."
yeah,
He said, "Don't take
exactly.
any responsibility. I'll take the responsibility from it." I'll tell
And
you
that's
what
why
I think.
Vince's ass got punched and spit
I
on.
agree,
Shit.
and he should have. He got well. Not only that, he broke his ankle because he fell over a bag. He
I
either
don't know
broke
anything
it
about
or he
the ankle
sprained
or
it real
whatever.
bad.
I never heard
I
anything
just know
about
he
the
took a
ankle.
good
Yes.
punch or whatever.
No, he
Yeah,
did. Watch,
he got knocked out.
go back and there's videos that talk about it, but go back and watch. If you watch Wrestling with Shadows, that Bret Hart documentary, which is really good, by the way. So I'm gonna
Yeah, I've
promo
seen it,
that
but
for
I'd never heard
All right.
anything about the ankle.
It didn't talk about the ankle in that, but they talk about it later on and everything in like little interviews and stuff and everything. But if you watch when it shows Hunter and Bret Hart's wife and everybody, they're sitting in the hallway and you can hear, the stuff going on between Bret and Vince in the locker room. All of a sudden, the locker room door opens, and when Vince is coming out, you can see him walking, and he's walking with a limp because it's either twisted or he broke his ankle. Because when Bret punched him, he went backwards and stepped on a gym bag
I
and
always
messed his foot.
assumed it was because he was unconscious and couldn't stand up
No,
straight.
no, it is. I don't think he lost consciousness. But no, you know what I think honestly and truthfully should have happened that night, and before because I got a couple more questions and then we'll wrap this up and everything. Honestly and truthfully, the best route would have been to do business on everybody's part. Now, what doing business meant, I don't know. Like Brett said, why couldn't it have just ended up in a double DQ? You know what I'm
Because
saying?
belts can't change hands during
You're right.
DQ.
Right. You're right.
That's
And
the
that's
rule.
and right. And that's the thing is that's the only reason I say that Brett should have done business and just given it up because and it touches on what JD said. It just doesn't do the business any good to walk away with the guy leaving holding the title. You've got to up that next guy, even if he's already a superstar. You know what I mean? It just to me, he should have dropped it, and then Sean and DX can leave. The whole schmoz thing that Brett always talks about could have happened as long as it didn't happen to where a DQ happened. But that could have been the reason why. You see what I'm saying? That could have been the reason why Brett lost, not because it made Brett look bad. Not, Brett didn't look bad because of the fact that he lost because he's a bad wrestler. DX cheated. That's what DX is.
I've thought about that so much.
He didn't want to
and
put Sean over at all.
I know, but that's the thing. He should have just done business. That's what I mean by he should have just done business.
Yeah.
But I also understand his bitterness too. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I get what Uncle Sam was saying about, man, I'm pissed now because you've promised me all this stuff. And now, even though he was getting a big payday from WCW, he didn't want to go to WCW. He had lived under Hogan before. He didn't want to live under Hogan anymore.
Amen.
He knew what that was like. You know what I'm saying? He just did. He knew when I go down to Atlanta, I'm just going for a paycheck. And unfortunately, that even got cut short, But anyways, I didn't mean to go on a long tangent, but that's just what I think that they're both wrong. I think they're both wrong, and the whole situation was just wrong because we got robbed of something that could have been good. But what wouldn't have happened had it not happened? Who knows? What was you going to say, Tuck?
Something about the Montreal Screwjob just has always screamed lack of imagination to me. And even Undertaker has talked about how he wishes that Vince would have let him in on it because he feels like he could have mediated it better. And I agree 100% with what you were saying. It's not like they were unfamiliar with even at that time of like the Eddie Guerrero style win, making it obvious that he didn't win fair and square, but he still won. The ref didn't see it. I mean, hell, November that happens, and then I don't think Shawn won cleanly against Undertaker a single time over the next several months. So they were familiar with that outlook and what it does for storytelling. He could have, like you said, he was DX. They could have had a spot where the ref got knocked down and they got knocked down, and then Triple H comes in with the chair, China, and then super kick, and then the ref is revived, and then 1, 2, 3. And then, just like they do with every retirement match now, Sean has the title, he F's off, and then Brett has his moment in his hometown where he says goodbye.
Would have been perfect.
Perfect ending. Brett did business. He left the hometown hero. Everybody knows that he got screwed, and that would have been the talk. And even to this day, with the diehard fans that he had in Montreal, Sean might still would go to Montreal and them chant, "You screwed Brett. You screwed Brett."
And all he had to do was go down to Atlanta and tell everybody at the booking committee, let's use that.
Yep.
This guy
100%.
just got screwed up north.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Look what they're allowing up north. Bunch of degenerates up there. And
That's
I
a
see
whole
you got
episode.
the same thing.
Yes.
Brett,
That's a whole nother-
as far as storytelling goes, Brett is
whole-
lawful good.
That's a whole parallel universe.
That's what I'm
thing.
saying. Yeah, that's a
100%,
whole nother episode
But, yeah.
right there. Yeah, where WWE doesn't fumble Brett's.
This
Yeah.
is not
into
the
company.
MCU. we
Yeah.
can't, this is the
Oh,
wrestling.
are you kidding me, dude? I'm so down for a what if episode. If
what if episodes in
WWE
wrestling?
doesn't fumble Brett's arrival, that'd be a fun episode.
Okay, so let me
Yeah.
ask y'all this before we get to out of here. We're almost at the hour and a half mark. I don't want to bug people too much. So it says, because we are getting ready to do a recap episode too. So be honestly and truthfully, being fully objective, not being the fan and marking out for them, and I'm going to do the same thing. Which wrestler do you feel like influenced today's generation more heavily? Do you think it was Brett? Do you think it was Sean? Or do you think it was, like I said, they're equal? So it's an equal portion of both. Uncle Slam?
Are you talking about that influence wrestlers or fans or both?
I just influenced,
In general,
yeah,
I would
yeah,
honestly
just
say-
influenced today's generations, whether it's fans or wrestlers. Let's just do both.
honestly, I think more people probably know Shawn Michaels from DX than they do Bret Hart, just because DX's legacy and the whole Attitude Era. I think if you're talking to wrestlers, that's it's probably subjective. It kind of depends on the individual. Because I've heard a lot of people say, Bret Hart, inspired me. He taught me this and that. I know Shawn Michaels has had a big impact on a lot of people in like NXT and kind of guiding their careers and trying to teaching them. So, and like I said, all their matches have been, are classics. You know what I'm saying, man? They all were world champions, multi-time world champions. They had some of the best matches. So I would honestly, I would say they would be equal, but it really just depends on the individual. Because I think, I can find a lot of great in both of them. And being a Bret Hart fan, that's kind of hard to say, but I respect Shawn because I don't think he would have had as many great matches if you don't have a great opponent and stuff, So I think each of them brought a lot to wrestling. So to me, it's just too hard to pick.
Okay, JD.
Yeah, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna say probably overall, Shawn Michaels probably inspired more people, and that's just probably because of the hype that DX had at the Attitude Era after Brett left WWE, and then WCW, of course, bumbled everything. So, but what I would say is that Bret Hart, I think what he left behind or some of his legacy gets forgotten about. And that is his actual in-ring ability. I think Brett is the better in-ring wrestler more than Michaels. Michaels can do a lot of stuff. He's an entertainer. He's charismatic. He can go to the top rope. He can do a lot of stuff. But you know what I've never seen, at least not with the consistency that Bret Hart can do? Bret Hart can have a match with a terrible wrestler and make him look like $1 million.
Shawn Michaels can have a match with a broom.
I disagree with that statement. I don't agree.
The greatest heavyweight champion of all time said that of the first ladder match, Shawn Michaels just went out there and had a match with a ladder.
There just happened to be somebody else in the ring.
I
would go that far. That's
disagree.
a reach right there.
That's
Yeah,
what Ric
yeah,
Flair
I
said.
think I think you're reaching there.
I'm not reaching. That's what Ric Flair said.
Well, Ric
That's
Flair.
your fandom over
I'm a
there.
huge Ric Flair fan, and he's got dementia.
Well,
So
this
listening
was
to Ric
30
Flair at
years
this
ago.
point-
This was 30 years ago.
He's had. Have you watched him in the last 30 years, J-Mac? Have you
Yeah,
seen Ric
But 30
Flair?
years ago, he still knew what he was talking about. We can't discount.
He was
it just
drinking
'cause
a
it's
lot,
Shawn
brother.
Michaels.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
J-Mac.
Rick was
Yeah,
sipping
man,
back then.
You need to go back and
Ric
look at the
Flair
history.
has always said that Shawn Michaels is the greatest in-ring competitor of all time.
I can go
Well, that's
pull
a
up
personal
footage where he
opinion.
says that about Sting as well. I've also
But
got
there's
footage- I've
no
also got
better
footage where-
personal opinion
Bret
to
Hart.
get than the greatest heavyweight champion. Who's a better expert than Ric Flair to say something
Look,
like that?
But he
I
said
put it
that
like
about how
this.
many
Miss it.
people. I could show you footage of him saying it about Sting.
No, I've never heard him say that
All right, I'll
Sting is the
find
greatest.
some and send it to
Okay,
you.
please
Look,
do.
Uncle
Shawn
Slim,
Michaels
those
is the
algorithms.
greatest performer. Brett is the greatest wrestler. Two different
I-
things here can be
I
true.
I
at the same
agree.
time.
I agree with
Yeah.
that. I agree
Like
with
if you're
that.
talking about a performer, then Shawn Michaels hands down. If you're talking about wrestling, getting in wrestling in a ring,
Technical
Shawn Michaels
wrestling,
can't-
mat
you can't
wrestling,
fuck
and
with
stuff like that. You're right.
Yeah, and I don't.
but there is
think-
a
mean, I ain't
difference
gonna say you
between being a
can't fuck with him.
performer and being a
Shawn-
wrestler.
Sean can wrestle, but he's not known as a technical wrestler like
Exactly.
Brett.
He's a great
Brett is-
performer.
Yes.
That's where his athleticism
Yes,
comes
that's
in
what I'm
and
trying to say.
showcase.
But Shawn, I don't think I've seen Shawn Michaels have matches with inferior opponents. He gets frustrated, angry, and then he ends up shooting on them.
Well, so does Brett.
So no, he
Brett's-
puts people over.
Brett,
I've seen him
Brett has broken jobbers' necks.
Where?
Is
Show
it
me
that-
that headline too.
Okay, I will get the story and bring
All
it
right,
up
let's
to
share. We'll share some information after the episode. We don't want to bore the people.
you. You're right. Go
So,
ahead.
but that's why I would say anyway. Back to the point that I was trying to make that I think Bret Hart is a better performer. I think the fact that he can make other people look good is something that's lost on a lot of today's wrestlers. The art of losing,
I agree.
the art of taking the move instead of delivering the move. I think that has been lost a little bit than back then.
Tom McGee during a WWF match in the mid 1980s.
When in his rookie year, probably.
He wasn't a rookie in WWE. He was like 5 years in.
He was
But-
also part of the Hart family. He shouldn't have been breaking anybody's neck.
That's right.
Share me the link then, so I can validate that story then, J-Mac.
Okay, I
All right,
sure
good.
will.
But anyway, that's what I was saying. I think Bret
All you gotta
Hart
do
makes
is
other
Google it
people-
real quick.
Okay. Yeah.
Well,
That's not my
okay.
style. Give me the thing, and then I'll do some research and validate the story. Link me
Tom,
what
just
you
look
got,
up Tom.
and then I'll
Just
validate it.
look up Tom McGee. Is all you got to look up.
All right, I'll look up
WWE
Tom
enhancement talent Tom McGee and see how he got his. Let's see, what was it?
I don't think Shawn was able to put other people over the way Bret was. I don't think Shawn had the skills that Bret did to put other people over to make them look as good as Bret. That's what the only thing that I was trying to say. I think Bret did a better job, which is a lost art form in today's wrestling, of putting other people over and making it look really good. I don't think that happens as much today as it used to happen. And I think Bret was one of the best people to make someone else look good.
Hot take. I vehemently disagree with that.
I think that, and this, I will throw out there with an asterisk that this isn't fair to Brett because how his career got cut short and he didn't get the run in the 2000s like Shawn did. But I think Shawn Michaels in his 05 to 2010 run in that time was the greatest at making people look good and putting them over.
Then you know what? Maybe I need to go back and watch some of those wrestling matches because that's not when I used to watch. That's because when WCW closed. Listen, I gave WWE a real chance when WCW closed. I really tried. I gave them more than a year, and then I had to turn them off. So I did not see between 2003 and 010 and even 015. I was not really a fan of wrestling at that point.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Because I've never been a huge fan of the product that WWE puts on. The only reason I'm familiar with it in the 90s is because the Monday Night Wars. You had to flip back and forth to see what was going on. So that's
I recommend, and it's sad, man, because I agree with you, Tucker. It's sad that Brett's career got cut short and we didn't get to see that finish, because Sean came back. Man, could you imagine if Brett was able to still be around for a comeback against Sean? You know what I'm saying? They'll bury the hatchet.
Yeah.
And you know what I'm saying, with Triple H around right then, it may have been the end of their careers and stuff, and it would have been time for them to just do what Sean was doing and getting other people over. But gosh, man, it would have been great to see because look at and JD, some of the matches that I would recommend. Go look up Jericho and Sean. Go look up
Jericho's another person who's damn good in the ring. And
look up Jericho and Sean at WrestleMania. Angle
for the point that
Angle and
JD is
Sean.
making, for the point that JD is making, Jericho and Sean is a great match. Angle and Sean is a great match. But to the point about putting people over and having a match with a bad wrestler, WrestleMania 23, Shawn Michaels, John Cena, the Silver Dome, headlining WrestleMania, probably the greatest match of John Cena's career. And this and they'll both tell you, Cena was the top guy for solid 2. He had headlined the last 2 WrestleManias before that, or
I'm not a
one
big
at
fan of
least.
Cena.
Yeah, he had headlined, I think, the last 2 WrestleManias before. And whenever they put him up with Shawn, they basically said, all right, man, this is your make or break. You're going up with the greatest of all time. Show up or don't, but this is going to be what determines on whether or not we run with you. And
Yeah.
Shawn put him through his paces, and they had Shawn did a fucking illegal pile driver, an ass down pile driver to Cena on steel steps and busted his skull open. And left Cena standing in the ring after putting him over. Cena tried to shake his hand. Shawn looks at him and just shakes his head and walks out. Cena gives him the salute. He puts him over. He does it eloquently. J-Mac said something earlier about Shawn's best run being intercontinental to world title. And for me personally, maybe I'm biased because that's the Shawn that I got to watch the most. But his second run, his clean, sober, putting people over, that was Shawn's best work.
I remember this day, me and Uncle Slam were watching the Elimination Chamber where he won the world title and everything. Uncle Slam was so mad and everything.
I think that goes, but I think that's why I have the opinion that I have, because I think I agree with you. I have no doubt that while Shawn is sober, that he likely has way better matches than he did in the 90s. Yeah. So I fully believe that. I'll definitely have to go check some of that footage out.
You know what I think it is?
I think Clean Shawn is probably I would also say Clean Shawn was probably his best run also, even though I didn't really watch it.
I think from WrestleMania 19 to WrestleMania 26, Shawn Michaels won match of the year every year.
Probably.
In the Slammies.
I think the honest and truthful thing of it is like, I think it's just the different times.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't Shawn's job to put people over back then.
Right.
During his first big run and the first couple of runs with the world title, it was his job to help carry that company because everybody had just left. You know what I'm saying? It was him and Brett and Undertaker, and that was it. Your next heavyweight champion. Again, they were talking about Tatanka. And that's no disrespect to Tatanka. I like Tatanka, to be honest with you, but it was
not a world champ.
Well, no. But they were talking about it. So I mean, that's what I'm saying is like, he had to sit, and it was his job to carry, not to get people over at that point in time. Because they had to try to it was other people's job at that time to step up. You know what I'm saying? With like Triple H, he was starting to come in as Hunter Hearst Helmsley. Mick Foley had come in as Mankind and stuff and everything. And those guys eventually got to the point to where it was like, okay, we've got to turn towards somebody else. We can't just use these 3 guys anymore all the time. So when they started turning towards Mankind, and he was the first person that ever, cleanly beat the Undertaker, and had people questioning whether the Undertaker could beat this guy and stuff like that, and it moved into Hell in a Cell, which is one of Uncle Slam's favorite matches. Then you had Hunter Hearst Helmsley coming up, and winning. Well, he was going to win King of the Ring and all that stuff and everything that was supposed to happen, with the guys that they lost. And it wasn't the time for Brett, Undertaker, or Shawn to look weak. They had to look like they were unbeatable and let the people like Ahmed Johnson and people like that elevate themselves up to that level.
I think
And
in a
at the
match,
same
even though
time, Sean, Taker, and Brett did not have anybody to put them over the way Cena did, the way Kurt Angle
Owen,
did, the way The
Owen,
Rock did.
Owen.
All these, I mean, you got, Hogan putting over The Rock, Austin and The Rock putting over each other constantly, Sean putting over all these talent, Angle and Jericho, and even Cena putting people over. When you only have three top guys, there's only so much passing back and forth you could do, especially at that time. They didn't have that, and so they also couldn't be that for anybody.
It was hard. Uncle Slam, you got any thoughts on this one?
Uh, Not really, man. I kind of said my piece on it. Honestly, like I said, I mean, y'all know where I stand when it comes to as far as Brett and Sean and going back and forth or whatever.
Okay, well, this is my last question for everybody on the panel before we let y'all get out of here. Is Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels the greatest rivalry in wrestling history?
No,
no,
no.
Why do you say no?
Because-
What rivalry is better?
uh, I mean, honestly, while I didn't watch a lot of it, I think I'd listen if Brett stays with the company. I think yeah, but I don't think it was long enough. I don't think you have enough. I don't think there's enough history. I think you have rivalries like between Randy Orton and Edge, John Cena and Randy Orton, Triple H and Batista. There's so many other great rivalries that lasted longer, that put on better matches. That's why I say
Theirs
no
went back
Bret
to
and
the
Shawn.
Rockers and the Hart Foundation. Theirs was almost in ring. It was more than a 10-year rivalry.
Well, you didn't need one. Wasn't thinking about the Hart Foundation and the Rockers. You asked me about Shawn and Brett. So
Well, yeah,
I was
but they were,
thinking about-
but that rivalry was there.
Yeah,
That,
but
that
I,
mutual rivalry.
to
That's
me, I
where
don't
it started. That's where it started.
Yeah, but it didn't really get big until when it got big. That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't really, when I look back at it, yes, you're right. Yes, with the tag teams, they did have a little bit like preliminary rivalry that then boiled into it. But I would still say no because of the longevity. I think there's some other rivalries that I was more interested in, be more entertained by than Shawn
Well,
and Brett.
when it comes to rivalries, it's really not even a fair discussion because the greatest rivalry of all time, and it's fight me, at me, whatever. It's impossible to argue with, in my opinion. Greatest rivalry of all time is Vince McMahon and Stone Cold Steve Austin.
That I would put up there. I would
There's
definitely
just
put that in
like
the
there's
conversation.
for what it did for the business, what everybody knows, what everybody remembers. But comparing Sean and Brett, they had great matches. They had a very memorable rivalry. It didn't have a lot, but I mean, I'd put Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes, Ric Flair and Sting. Off the top of my head, those are two that surpassed Brett and Sean day and night, night and day.
And I would agree. I would agree with Tucker. I just didn't go with WCW references because I thought we were trying to stay.
Well,
on
just no. Rivalry in general.
But yeah, I agree.
We don't limit it to just companies.
I agree. I agree exactly with Tucker. I was way more into Sting and Flair, Flair and Dusty, Sting and Dusty. I was way more interested in those than Brett and Sean. It was a great rivalry, but the greatest, no.
Uncle Slam.
I don't know if it's the greatest, but I would put it up there with some of the great rivalries. Obviously, I gotta agree with Tucker when it comes to the Stone Cold, like McMahon rivalry being number one, just for longevity and intensity. But if I'm gonna go, B or some shit, then I'm gonna say Sean and Brett. I'm gonna say, Dusty and Flair, or Sting and Flair, or Rock and Austin or something like that, or maybe a Hogan and Andre, maybe something like that, or Macho. But I would put it up there. I don't know it. Like I said, I can't say it's the greatest because McMahon and Austin, but I would put it right below it, or I'd put it in the group. But I can't say that it is the best.
All right.
And let's not take away from the impact, because if Sean goes to Montreal to this day, you let the crowd get enough silence, they're still going to start chanting, "You screwed Brett, you screwed Brett." But, Vince McMahon's going to be, 90 years old. I mean, hell, he's going to be in his casket one day. And if Stone Cold's music hits, you're going to see that damn corpse just do that gulp, that,
Yeah.
Well, for
Shout out
me,
to
just,
Apple.
for me, I would say that this is a top 5
yeah,
all-time
agree to that.
rivalry, and honestly and truthfully, I would put it third. I wrote my top 6 down the other day. So my number 1 was always Andre Hogan, and that's just because if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't even be talking about any of the other ones. The second, of course, was the McMahon Austin because it had the same impact as the Andre Hogan. Third for me was Brett and Shawn because again, these two guys carried the company as the Intercontinental Champions.
I can already tell you're going to piss me off with this.
Fourth is going to be Sting and Flair, because that meant so much to early WCW and late NWA. And then the fifth for me is just the Sting versus the NWO for the impact that had. And then after that is Dusty Flair.
So just not even an honorable mention to Piper and Snuka.
Nah,
they didn't even make top 5.
Nah,
you know what?
They probably wouldn't make top 15 if I had to sit and think about it. Top 20, maybe. There's so many more I could think. Undertaker, Mankind, Piper, Hogan.
I didn't know we were just going to be speaking heresy in this moment.
Heresy against the crown, J-Mac.
Well, guys, I think we have settled it. Shawn Michaels is the greatest of this rivalry.
This man's on drugs. Do not pay attention to him. His views do not reflect our group.
I don't know that his views reflect anybody except his own.
Oh my gosh.
Exactly.
All I'm gonna say is, man, I didn't think about it, man. I should have got my Funko Pop, man. I got the my son, the one that commented earlier talking about hold on, let's see. He said, I would say Ray had a big part, or Eddie, in that was in the new the Ruthless Aggression era. But I should have got my Funko Pop out, man. My son got me a Funko Pop of Bret Hart and Shawn from WrestleMania 12. It's pretty. Look at him. He's got the. Don't make me like pull up the Shawn Michaels music for us here, man. I will do it in a heartbeat. But yeah, guys.
Anyway, so I'm okay.
There you go. Well, guys, if everybody's done it, we'll let you all decide. Who is it? Is Shawn Michaels the greatest? Is Bret Hart the greatest? Are they just the best of each other, only the opposite? Best and worst of each other, if you're going to say that. I mean, like I was trying, the tagline says Hart versus Heartbreak. I mean, it was just, they were meant to be rivals. Anybody got anything else to say about these fellers?
I think we covered it.
All righty. Well, guys, we are going to ring that damn bell. Referees hit that 3 count.